If you've been around the anime FGC scene for any extended period of time, then you've likely heard of a franchise called Blazblue. Blazblue was the flagship franchise for Arc System Works, and still remains as one of their strongest properties to this day. Back in the early 2000s, Arxis actually lost the rights to the Guilty Gear franchise, as it was technically owned by another company and they were contracted to make the game. When the company that owned Guilty Gear decided they didn't want to keep making fighting games with the franchise for some reason, Arxis realized they needed a new property to make fighting games under, and thus Blazblue was born. With 5 mainline fighting games, a bunch of expanded versions of games, and several spin-off titles, Blazblue has become a reputable franchise with some pulling power. But we're not here to talk about the new roguelike game that I don't currently own. Arxis, please send me a copy! We're here to talk about the last mainline Blazblue game, the one that everybody praises to the heavens and back. The one, the only, Blazblue Cross-Tag Battle. Sorry, what was that? BB Tag is considered a spin-off game. What do you mean that people hate this game? Wait, it's got fucking Adachi in it. What do you mean? How do you hate this game? No, you're overreacting! Today, we're going to be talking about the actual last mainline fighting game for the Blazblue series, being Blazblue Central Fiction. Fun fact, Central Fiction appears to be the only game, apart from Calamity Trigger, that didn't get an updated re-release. Chrono Phantasma got an extended edition, and Continuum Shift got a straight-up sequel. The closest that this game got was a special edition released on the Nintendo Switch in 2019. From what I can tell, though, it just has all of the DLC unlocked from the start. Recently, well, not recently, but in the span of this game's lifetime recently, the game got rollback netcode on Steam, allowing for players all across the world to be able to fight each other with good netcode. This, like basically every other game that retroactively gets rollback netcode, breathed new life into the game. But is it worth it? Should you pick it up? What even is a Blaz, and why is it blue? Well, let's go over all of that. Let's talk about Blazblue Central Fiction. Now, Blazblue is one of those anime games. You know the ones. The ones where everyone who plays it is hoarding around a setup that's under the stairs in the venue. Stink lines radiating off of one of the players in the setup as you hear what is basically a dog whistle coming from one of the characters on the screen as the other is reciting a thesis statement as their move name. That move, of course, summoning an army of insects that swarm the other characters for 70% of their life as one of the players comes over to you and explains how actually this is how all fighting games should be designed. Now, I'm sure that this statement makes you think that I don't like the game, but let me drop the M. Night Shyamalan twist on you and tell you that I'm actually the Ragnar player with stink lines radiating off of him. Blazblue is a complex anime game, but it's not because it has hard-as-nail execution or ridiculous system mechanics. The game is complicated because Blazblue has managed to create a game in which the whole game changes based on what matchup you're currently playing. It feels like there's 2 ways the game has complexity in it. There's the system mechanics and the standard execution of the game, and then there's the character-specific stuff. Each of them are equally as important as the other, so I'll be tackling them one at a time as not to overload you. I'll also be demonstrating everything I talk about on Ragnar, partly because he's a very simple character who has a very well-rounded and universal kit, but mostly because he's the character that I play and I'm less likely to get shit wrong when talking about him. So let's go over the system mechanics, shall we? Blazblue is a 4-button fighting game. The buttons are alphabetically labeled, being A, B, C, and D. A, B, and C are your light, medium, and heavy attacks. All of these are normal attacks, and it's not uncommon for characters to have multiple different directional inputs on buttons. For example, Ragnar's 6A is a simple move that gives him immunity to all air attacks after 4 frames. This makes it a reliable anti-air, not unlike 6Ps in Guilty Gear, though you can't reliably counter-poke with the move like you can with 6Ps. His 6B is a slow overhead attack, which you can use to start combos, and his 6C is a low launcher attack. It's not uncommon for characters to have moves like this or even more directional normals on their A, B, and C buttons. The D button is known as the drive button, and is where most of the character's unique mechanics come into play. The drive button does generally give characters more normals, but they tie into the character's unique mechanics. We'll get into this more later. But for Ragnar, he's able to gain life back while using drive moves and drive follow-ups. So all of his drive moves have the added benefit of giving him lifesteal. Well, it's not lifesteal, it's a flat amount of healing, but you don't care about that. You want to see the funny whitehead man say shit. Throwing is done with B and C, and yes, you can with a throw, leading to shimmy situations. They're rare, but they do happen. You can also air throw, because of course you can. If you press A and B, you get a crush trigger, which... Crush triggers are attacks that will guard break the opponent unless they use barrier. I have never used this move, and of course, you can taunt.
I don't have time for this shit.
Now let's go over each bar individually and talk about what they all do. The first one is your health bar. It displays your current remaining health. If the bar runs out, you lose. Tell me to slow down if I'm going a little bit too fast for you. I know this is complex stuff. When it gets low, it turns red. However, this doesn't have any gameplay implications apart from letting your opponent use Astral if they have a round. What's Astral? Well, we'll get to that. Just under the health bar, we have the barrier gauge. Barrier is a mechanic where you're able to create a barrier around yourself by holding back plus A plus B. While holding barrier, the defensive player takes 0 chip damage and pushes the opponent back slightly. Stop me if you've heard this one before. There are more uses for barrier in this game though compared to faultless defense in Guilty Gear. For example, there are several attacks in which you can only block it by using barrier. The official term for these attacks are guard crush attacks, but players still call them unblockables. Barrier does increase your block stun by 1 frame, which can fuck you over if you're not careful, but that's really high level talk and we're against that here. Barrier is of course tied to its own gauge in this game, meaning that you don't have to burn meter like you do in Guilty Gear. It's nice that you're able to use barrier at the start of a match, especially with how important it is in this game since you're going to be using it a lot, trust me. Also, I only found this out while writing the script, but it turns out that this game has its own version of IBFD where you send your opponent back further by instant blocking while barriering. I guess Blazblue really was paving the way for Strive, huh? You do need to be careful though, as if you use all of your barrier, you get forced into Danger State. In Danger State, you take 20% more incoming damage, so you really don't want to burn through that entire gauge. Some characters are designed to take out your barrier too, so make sure you're careful when spending it. Of course, at the bottom of the screen, we have the heat gauge. This is your meter gauge, and it's tied to a couple of different options for you. At 25 meter, you gain the ability to use crush triggers like we talked about before, and at 50 meter, you gain access to most of the options in the game. The first is counter assault. While blocking, press forward, A and B, and you'll do an attack that gets the opponent off of you. It doesn't deal any damage, but you can technically combo from it. However, it is hard programmed that if you do a combo from a counter assault, it's straight up cannot kill the opponent and will always leave them on 1 HP. Guys, I have the funniest idea for a will it kill submission. Hear me out. Rapid cancel is something that I've actually talked briefly on the channel about before, and is Blazblue's version of Roman cancel. By pressing A, B, and C when the attack connects with an opponent, hit, or block, you spend 50 meter and return yourself to a neutral state, retaining some of your momentum from the attack. They're extremely versatile and can be used for combos, pressure, and mix-ups if you know what you're doing. You can also just save yourself because your opponent blocks your DP. Finally, we have distortion drives, which are this game's version of supers. I can't go over every distortion drive because this video has a due-by date, but keeping with Ragnar, he has 2. 214-214D is Devoured by Darkness, an unblockable super which drains the life from your opponent. It also has 16 frames of invincibility on starter. It's very good if you want to try and cash out a combo and get a bunch of health back instead of just going for completely raw damage. But this super pales in comparison to his 623-146D. Carnage Scissors! The mother of all wake-up reversals. Carnage Scissors is an invincible super which goes basically full screen and even allows Ragnar to anti-air the opponent if they're close enough to the ground. Yeah, it's easy to punish if you block it, but we don't think like that in this house. Every character has their own amount of distortion drives, with some characters having as many as 6 distortion drives. Jesus Christ, Terumi. The only thing left to talk about with a heat gauge is what happens when you get 100% heat. If you have full heat gauge, the game is on match point, and your opponent is below 35% health when you start a combo, you can use Astral Heat. Astral Heats are cinematic supers which result in the opponent's death. They're less like instant kills and more like dramatic finishes, being a flashy way to end the game right then and there. They're really cool, and the community tells me that they're really easy to land, but I don't know if I believe them. Let's go! I did it! But what about that little spinning thing in the corner of the screen? Is it an ADHD trap? No, but thanks for pointing that out. In order to keep retention up, I'll be putting Subway Surfers on the side of the screen while I explain this next part. This is the burst gauge. Obviously, with it being the burst gauge, it works similar to how the burst gauge works in Guilty Gear without the gold burst function. If you're taking damage, you can pop burst to get out of the combo. So what is there instead of gold burst? Well, when you activate burst in neutral, instead of getting a gold burst, you go into a mode known as overdrive, and it does a bunch of different things. To begin with, the startup is invincible, and you can use it in neutral, block stun, or even off of normals if you can special cancel. Overdrive has unique properties for every character based on what their kit is. Going back to Ragnar, when he activates OD, his drive moves deal more damage, give him more lifesteal, and his special moves are more powerful. For example, Gauntlet Hades now launches the opponent extremely high instead of just slightly upward, and Hell's Fang's follow-up can now be dash cancelled for more combo opportunities. Basically, OD makes you more powerful for a limited amount of time. The amount of time the buff lasts depends on the amount of HP that you have. The lower the HP, the longer the buff lasts. OD is extremely powerful and can lead to insane comebacks with how it opens up the character's kits, or can just lead to you absolutely dumpstering the opponent even more than you already were. I like how the game makes it more of a comeback mechanic because of the length increase when you're at low HP. Also, the activation being completely invincible means you're able to get out of block strings and even mix-ups if you time it correctly, though it can be pretty easily baited if the opponent knows what they're looking for. You can end your overdrive early by activating a move known as Exceeded Excel, which is a super type move that can only be done in overdrive. When it hits the opponent, it instantly puts you into active flow if you haven't already been in the state. What's flow state? Okay, so active flow is a state in which you deal more damage because the game decided that you're in active flow state now. If you use Exceeded Excel during active flow, the damage is basically doubled, so it's worth trying to overlap active flow and overdrive. How do you get into active flow? Fuck if I know. There's a long list on Dustloop all about the factors that go into activating active flow, from hitting different attacks, having your attack block, clashing attacks, blocking overheads, and stuff like being in OD gives you double active flow points. So basically, you play the game, and eventually, you'll be put into active flow state. And that's most of the mechanics. Enough to get a baseline, anyway. I didn't realize how much was going on in this game until I looked at the Dustloop wiki page, and it felt like I fell down a rabbit hole of mechanics. Look how long it scrolls! What do you mean there's different ground text? Are you insane? Blazblue is already a dense game with a bunch of different mechanics, all intersecting in different ways. While not every mechanic is extremely fleshed out and is interlinked like other Axis titles, the fact that there is a bunch of stuff all on top of each other makes the overall game really complex. And we haven't even gotten to the real meat of the game. It's finally time to talk about the other side of the coin, being the characters and all of their unique mechanics. Blazblue has 36 characters to choose from. If you currently count the characters on screen, you'll notice that there are only 35. And that's because I refuse to pay $5.99 to play as a Catboy. I can get my Twitch chat to pay me to do that one in real life. Each character in Blazblue has their own unique mechanics. They're generally on a scale of, relatively small and not that impactful to this character is playing a completely different game now. We'll start with the easy end of the scale, where the characters that I like generally end up staying. Just because these mechanics are simple doesn't mean that they're not impactful in different ways. We've already been over this one, but sticking with Ragnar, his mechanic is that his drive moves and drive follow-ups cause you to heal yourself for a set amount, depending on how many of them you use in a combo. This is a system that's meant to directly counterbalance his below average health. In fact, Ragnar has the tied lowest health in the whole game, but thanks to his drive, he's able to have more of an average health bar since he literally gets it back over time. With the way that his kit works, it means that he wants to try and brawl with his opponent to get his health back. Along similar lines, we have someone like Bullet, who has a basic level up system known as Heat. It has 3 levels being 0, 1, and 2. Bullet is able to spend this heat in order to do follow-ups from her special moves to do a bunch of damage. Plus, all of her drive moves deal more damage in heat, and her lock-on ability gains invincibility as she travels towards her target. Not to mention that heat affects some of her moves in different ways, like making her projectile hit more times. Bullet wants to build up to level 2 heat as fast as possible, then cash out just as fast in order to get big damage. The best bullets are able to mix your shit and keep themselves in heat while rinsing your health bar. Makoto has a mechanic in which she is able to hold the drive button to get different levels for her attacks. Level 1 is a weak normal attack, level 2 can be special cancelled, and level 3 gives you a fatal counter when it connects. Some combos can only be done if you use the level 3 drive attack. Yukaterumi gains a bunch of heat when using drive moves, and when the opponent blocks one of the drive moves, they don't get any heat. When he activates Overdrive, he straight up drains your meter when he hits you and can cancel his supers into each other. As you can see, some of these characters have very simple mechanics. And then there's characters like Nine the Phantom, where each of her normals correlate to a different element, with A being water, B being air, and C being fire. When she uses a normal attack, she gains a piece of mana that correlates to the element that she just used. She can store 3 mana pieces at a time. Anytime she gets a new mana piece when she already has 3, the oldest mana piece in her queue is overridden. She then has 9 different spells that she can activate depending on the combination of elements that she has. Having one element gives you either ice, wind, or fire attacks, with the amount of that element changing its properties. Basically, the more mana you have of that attack, the longer it lasts. Then, when you begin combining the elements, you get different spells. And I know that there is already dramatic music playing behind me as I'm slowly zooming in on this war criminal of a character, but I simply cannot be asked to read all of these. Arakune is a man who's a bag full of bees. His unique mechanic is the curse meter, also known as Crimson. If Arakune hits you with his drive moves, he begins filling your curse bar. When your curse bar is full, he begins to summon bugs by letting go of an attack button, a process known as Negative Edge. The bugs' names are Arthur, Billy, Carlos, and Dennis, and they all have different properties. For example, Carlos needs to be barrier blocked. Arthur vacuums the player towards Arakune, while Billy pushes them away, and Dennis is arguably a psychopath. By utilizing his teleport and 2 and 4 moves while the bugs are on screen, Arakune is able to create unseeable left-right mix-ups which the blocker has to guess. Not to mention, even if they do guess right, they're still in curse and will probably need to keep blocking. He can also go invisible, because of course he can. All of this information was given to me by my Twitch chat's resident Arakune player, and I hate her! Carl and Relis are Zata 1 if Eddie did a bunch of crack. I assume they're extremely hard, because in my 48 hours of playing the game, I've literally never seen them. If you play Susanoo, you deserve to be shot. As you can see, Blazblue is a game in which the power level comes entirely from what the characters are able to do on their own, and what they bring to the table. It makes Blazblue a really intriguing game to play. Also, I want to quickly point out that the complexity of the character's drive system doesn't always correlate to how difficult they are to play. Naoto is easily the best example of this. Naoto has arguably one of the simplest drive systems in the whole game. He's able to use the long attacks made of his own blood, because this is an edgy as fuck anime game. Holding down the attack causes it to guard break, and he can dash cancel the attack to feint them. Extremely simple, literally the simplest in the game. His drive is he can do a big slash. But Naoto is considered one of the hardest characters in the game because of a little footnote. When Naoto runs, his special moves become empowered. Again, extremely simple, but it leads to some of the most insane combos you've ever seen. I seriously hope that you're good at microdashing, buffering, and know the best doctor known to mankind, because you're gonna give yourself fucking arthritis with these combos. Blazblue manages to completely change the kind of game it is with every character that you play. And when you put characters together with different game plans, that's when you get to the real complexity of the game. Some matches are pretty simple. Since I play Ragnar, my game plan doesn't normally change that much if I'm fighting someone like Terumi or Bullet. It's very much business as usual, but I have to keep an eye out for their gimmicks. The real fun of Blazblue is when you have matches where you have to change the way that you're playing. Take fighting Hakumen, for example. Hakumen slows the game down dramatically, being able to deal ridiculous amounts of damage off of one good counter hit, thus turning the game from an insanely fast anime brawler into something more akin to Samurai Showdown. A match where you have to patiently wait and bait out his parries and defensive options, knowing that one wrong move could lead to your death. And then you have matches like Arakune, which is just that one scene from The Wicker Man. I hate this character, let me play the game! Both are technically the same kind of matchup of don't get hit, but they both feel extremely different to play and go through. There's 2 ways to play Blazblue. You can do what I did and play a simple character, so you can learn all of the system mechanics and all of the gimmicks for each character, thus giving you a well-rounded look at the game and its roster so you can understand how the game works on a fundamental level. Or you can pick the most bullshit character you can find and go, "Attention everyone, I am picking Izunami. If you would like to hit your opponent, I recommend you fuck off." It's a pretty cool way to design a high power level game, and it leads to an interesting scenario. Now, I only have like 48 hours in the game, so that obviously means I'm the best Blazblue Central Fiction player to ever exist. But I think that this game is the kind of fighting game where the tier list model of plotting character strength doesn't actually work. let me explain. Since every character has their own unique ability, after a certain threshold, it feels like the characters end up playing their own game, right? Hakumen is playing a completely different game to Susanoo, who's playing a completely different game to Nine, who's playing a completely different game to Bang, who's playing a completely different game from Arakune, who's playing a completely different game to Hazuma, who is playing a completely different game to... You get the idea. It makes every match of Blazblue feel unique, which when you're finally into the game is extremely fun. But I won't lie to you guys. Getting into this game can make it feel like you're getting punched in the kidney several times in a row. And the moment that you think you're finally getting the hang of it, some other dude comes over and starts hitting you with the other kidney. Then when you finally get the hang of that and block that fist, 3 more guys show up out of nowhere and kick you in the private parts as hard as they can. And you'll just be on the floor like, please, Jesus, I need a minute, before they keep kicking you even more. But eventually, you develop the genitalia of steel and can keep going and then find a newbie and you extend your hand out to them for a good old kidney punch. I'm kidding. Mostly. Blazblue Central Fiction is a deep, in-depth fighting game with a lot of complicated systems inside of it. From the system mechanics, which does feel like Arc Sys copying their old homework a little bit, to the unique characters with crazy mechanics that make every matchup feel like you're playing a completely different game. It's a constantly refreshing experience playing the game against new players and trying to figure out what other characters do so you can play your game plan. There's a lot to learn and experiment with Blazblue, but since it's been so long since the game came out, should you start playing Blazblue Central Fiction in 2023? While it is hard to get into and the community is somewhat small compared to modern fighting games, I do think it's generally worth it to at least try to learn to play this game. There isn't a lot of new players in the game, so you should either come in with some friends so you got people who you can actually learn with, or do a bit of research so you actually know what you're up against. Apart from that, prepare to die, I guess. You'll have a good time, I promise, but just try not to go too crazy with all the bullshit you have to endure. If you want a more in-depth look at the game before playing it though, I recommend going over to my stream tonight. I'm playing matches against viewers at all skill levels, so you'll be able to see how my relatively mid Ragnar stacks up against people who actually know how to play this game. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you there.
As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Nap Time, Ben from Canada, Savantas de Leon, Daniel Wiederich, DJ Mindsoul, Fexo, Games.png, I Am Naruto, Jacko Reeves, King of Games, MP04, Ray W, Richmine, Super, Forcon, Tom Tanks, Voltaic Charge, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 Patreon supporters.